Patriots draft stuff. You paying attention to the Celtics? I'm sure you're
Yeah,
paying
yeah,
attention
for
to
sure.
the Celtics. So we'll probably throw some Celtics questions at the end there. We're pretty much having a conversation. So
Yeah, Pro Fan Sports Podcast. Let's get it. Pro fans, tune into the program. Every single week, get the dope, fam. Sean on the mic, very flat too. Keep you updated, that's what we do. Pro fans, tune into the program. Pro fans, tune into the program. Pro fans, tune into the program. Every single week, get the dope, fam.
Yo, what to do, everybody? It's your boy, John Altidor, Pro Fan Sports Podcast, back at you with another one of my boys, Vlad, Barry, and today we got Patriots beat reporter at Boston Herald and host of the Pats Interference Podcast, Andrew Callahan. How you doing, Andrew?
Doing well. Good to be with you guys.
Thank you for being here, man. As we were talking about before, man, how was your weekend, especially after, the Patriots draft?
Yeah, it's crazy. Draft weekend is always it knocks you out by the end of Saturday night. Look, I don't lay brick for a living. I'm not putting up sheetrock, but you just kind of feel first two late nights. You're studying all these guys, and you're on your toes, and you're waiting for more picks on Saturday. And Sunday, you finally get to decompress and kind of take a step back, which for a weekend like this is good because everyone had some very heated reactions right away to all those picks. So it was a good busy weekend.
Yeah, I mean the draft started Thursday night. And then Patriots, obviously nobody was surprised. They were picking at 21 and they traded back to the 29th pick. And, they did something strange and, picked
definitely something strange for sure.
Literally my reaction was like, who,
Who?
And, watching the broadcast on ESPN, the guy goes, yeah, and the Patriots pick is in, and the pick is Cole Strange. And I heard somebody say, oh, and Kansas City, who's going to pick at number 30. They didn't spend any time, talking about the Patriots pick at all. And obviously we saw the reaction around the league after that pick. How do you feel about that pick? And, are you okay with that pick at number 29?
Yeah, I don't think my reaction was too different from everyone else. It's, kind of a kick in the pants for me because it's still working for a newspaper here in, year of our Lord 2022. I had to file a story at 11, and that story was about, okay, day two prospects the Patriots are going to look for because you wake up Friday morning, you flip open the paper, what's going to happen tonight? On that list of day two prospects I had as a Patriot fit, was Cole Strange. So I look pretty bad the next morning, but there's something, you can't do anything about because he was projected to be drafted in the early 70s. Maybe second round pick, and here they go at 29. So definitely surprised. I thought they would go interior offensive line with the first pick. I thought it'd be Zion Johnson from Boston College, who went 17 to the Chargers. Before him, Kenyon Green from Texas A&M to the Texans. So I think that might have surprised the Patriots, not entirely, but from my standpoint, and kind of like I mentioned, kind of taking a breather Sunday and taking a bigger perspective, I think they just said, look, that's probably our last week one starting guard. Let's grab them now, and we'll get our corners later, which seemed to be the plan all along.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I try not to, study too much, as far as like the players coming in the draft. It's like as a Patriots fan, I never really see one mock draft that actually has anybody that we pick. So I'm just like, listen, we're wasting a lot of time doing. I know it's a lot of people's jobs to do that, but for me, I'm just like, listen, I'm just going to wait, and see who they pick, and then I'll do my studying, like, who is this guy? Usually that's how it goes. But there's a lot of reaction around the league, and the Patriots, I think they got like the worst grade on the draft by like Mel Kiper and stuff like that. I'm sure you did your homework on Cole Strange. Anything you found out after I know you did your research. What are some good things, about him that, we should be looking forward to?
Yeah, so Cole is a rare athlete. He's 6'5", 301 to 307 pounds, kind of depending on the day or maybe the meal. But he's a tough, hard-nosed guy. Played left guard at Chattanooga. Also got to start at center when at left tackle. So he's got some versatility. And I think even though he hasn't gone up against top-tier competition, like we said, playing at Chattanooga, he's got the physical skill set to hang in the NFL. It's going to be how do you apply that skill set and physicality because he's got the tools. Now, he didn't exactly wow people at the Senior Bowl, which would be your first glimpse, really, of him against top-tier competition besides one game he had against Kentucky. So I think the Patriots were higher on him in the process than everyone else. Clear, they took him 29th overall. But there's a higher ceiling there. It's just a matter of how quickly can you get that out of him for a guy who's turning 24 this summer and pretty much at his physical peak right now, maybe not in a year or two. So, I think he's going to be a good player. The question about him, why people have those lower grades, is just could you, A, have gotten a better player or maybe someone with a little bit higher ceiling at a more premium position?
Yeah. Let's talk about the second pick of the Patriots, who was the fastest guy in the draft, which in a way is surprising because the Patriots usually don't go after the fastest or the strongest. It's usually whoever Belichick likes, right? And they surprised us, and by many it was a reach, but it was also a position of need for the Patriots. Getting somebody that can extend the field of play for Mac Jones. What was your thought of the second pick of the Patriots?
Yeah, it was surprising in that you saw them trade up right from 54 to 50 to go get him, so they really prioritized whomever they were going to pick there. It turns out, as you mentioned, the fastest receiver timed at the NFL Combine, and I think he went against their prototype at the position for so long that not only did he have a 4.2 40 time, he had a slow 3 cone. He's tall and he's skinny, and he's not particularly quick. So I'm not saying that their prototype right at receiver is all that good because they drafted a receiver so poorly. But the prototype that he fits is a guy who's 181 pounds and 6'2", which means he's almost kind of a string bean. Doesn't hold up that well even with that speed. So I think there were other receivers in the board that personally I like more. Sky Moore out of Western Michigan who went to the Chiefs. George Pickens had some injury questions about himself, was once at Georgia, kind of 5-star kid, who might have been fit. But clearly, we heard from them throughout the offseason. We want to get faster. And in their mind, the best way to do that, just take the fastest guy.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
The other thing that surprised me as well was the quarterback pick in the 4th round. I mean, last year I was pretty excited when Belichick did what was the obvious, which was picking Mac Jones. But the next year I did not hint to pick a quarterback again in the draft, knowing that, we have Mac Jones hopefully for the next 10, 15 years. What do you think was the thought behind picking up a quarterback? I mean, I guess I know that you cannot throw enough dart at a position like a quarterback, but what was the thought of picking up a quarterback in the draft the year after you got a starter?
Yeah, I think for the Patriots, there are a couple different factors in there, but the bigger one is the one you just kind of hinted at, is that you want to be prepared at quarterback as best you can. Like they just don't want to get their, caught with their pants down if Mac Jones gets hurt. And you look at the guys they already have in the room. Jarrett Stidham's in the last year of his contract. I'd be surprised if he makes the team at this point. Brian Hoyer, they signed a 2-year deal. If they cut him this season, there's a little bit of a penalty. Next season, though, they could part ways. So theoretically, you fast forward 12 months, it might just be Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi in that room. And so obviously they liked him as a player, taking him as a 4th-round pick when you had different offensive linemen, other corners or receivers still on the board, and they go with him. So I think it's partly the big picture thing of they always want to be prepared in case of injury, the contract situations in their current room. But even still, I mean, he wasn't a guy that wowed a lot of evaluators and scouts with his tools. So in my opinion, if you're going to grab a guy in the 4th round who is going to sit for this season, like Brian Hoyer's your backup and that's it, then why not grab someone a little bit later who's got a stronger arm that you can work with for a year since he's not going to play anyway? And that's why I think, we talk about value. That was another kind of question mark of, did you get as much out of this pick as you could have looking at other positions and players that were still on the board?
And my last question is, now that we are 2 days away from the draft, some of the preliminary reactions were, oh, this was an awful draft by the Patriots. Well, what's your overall assessment of the Patriots draft a couple of days later?
Yeah, it's pretty much the same. I'd say people want to slap grades on it. And my standpoint is, look, if I had to give him a grade, it's probably around a C-, just in terms of the same reasons we talked about. It's just the players there, what are their ceilings, what were your other decisions? Like Trent McDuffie, corner out of Washington, was available at 21. They moved back. I thought it was a good move in the first round just because you had so many players on the board at that time where you can get an extra third-round pick and still get one of them. But Cole Strange was not on that list of players. Dax Hill was a corner out of Michigan, hybrid safety too, who they might have been able to pick. And it was more, just about the opportunities that they eschewed or said no to in favor of the guys they did pick, who I think Cole Strange could be a good player. I think Marcus Jones out of Houston could be a good player. It's just you could have had probably a higher ceiling with these guys. And I like to look at the draft picks as bets. And these bets, in my opinion, just have longer odds than they needed to. And you could have cashed out with some different guys that would have helped you probably sooner than like a Bailey Zappi or some of these running backs will this upcoming season.
Just wanted to ask, why do you think they didn't address arguably one of the biggest needs on the team, which was linebacker, inside and outside linebacker in the interior on the on the defense of line in front? They didn't really pick any guys that would help them in that area of the defense. So is there any particular reason that of why they decided not to do that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think especially at outside linebacker, right? Because we talk about guard, that's an open position, with the way they traded Jack Mason and had Ted Karras walk in free agency. They cut Kyle Van Noy. That was the first position and move of their offseason. I'm not saying it was a bad move. Kyle Van Noy is still a free agent. No one signed him. But you need some guy to replace him on first and second down. And you look at the guys on the roster, Josh Uche, Anthony Jennings, even Ronnie Perkins. Some of them didn't play last year or just don't have a precedent of really playing a good run defense, which we know Belichick harps on all the time. So that was a question mark for me. I don't have a good answer for. Inside linebacker, though, and I've said this a couple times the last few months where, and people I've talked to, they're a lot higher on the guys they have on the roster that I think we are on the outside. And I'm talking about guys like Juwan Bentley, who came back on a 2-year, $9 million deal. Mack Wilson, they traded for from Cleveland. And then Cameron McGrone, who was a 2021 fifth-round pick in Michigan, who only really fell because he tore his ACL. So he kind of took a redshirt year. And we asked Matt Groh, their new director of player personnel, about this, after the draft. And he's talking about the linebacker group. And the first name out of his mouth is Cameron McGrone. And I think it's because he's a guy, like I mentioned, had a redshirt. He's recovered. In the meantime, has absorbed the system, how to play the position, taking all these mental notes. So he's a young guy with some speed that I think can help them, and they view as a draft pick this year. And then you throw a guy like Raekwon McMillan. They're 4 solid players. You wonder what the ceiling is on Mack Wilson or I mentioned Cameron McGrone. But they figure, hey, one of them should hit, and we're good at that position.
I mean, I totally get what you're saying, but I just feel like that's a hard sell to the Patriots fan base, because there's a lot of uncertainty and unknown at that position, and that's an important position on the defense, and I feel like that was a weakness of theirs last year, particularly at the end of the season, where the defense declined and did not perform very well in big games against good offenses down the stretch of last season. So I mean, you would like to at least see them get at least 1 or 2 guys, particularly in the first round. I honestly thought that in the first round, that's when they should have addressed that, instead of I get they had offensive line needs, but I feel like that need at linebacker was more of a priority and should have been higher on their list than getting a guy like Cole Strange. Not Cole Strange or anything. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have drafted him. I'm just saying that they probably should have gone elsewhere and and addressed the need at linebacker with that pick, because there was some pretty good linebackers that were available at 29 that ended up going after that they could have gotten. So that's just how I feel about that pick and really where they stand with that. But hopefully they do something in the offseason to address the linebacker position.
Yeah, and I think it's a fair concern, right? Because if like I'm telling you, they bank on Cameron McGrone taking that step and being a player this year, and if he's not, you're kind of stuck with Raekwon McMillan, who's a so-so starter, but mostly backup in his career. Juwan Bentley is one of those slow-footed guys in the middle of the defense. and then Mac Wilson. So, again, I think their perspective is different from ours, right or wrong, and that's just what led them to the decision that they like their guys in-house. But yeah, you mentioned, I mentioned Trent McDuff earlier at 21 when they trade back with Kansas City. Quay Walker, guy out of Georgia who a lot of people liked at that spot, also available. And then he goes a couple picks later to the Packers. So I scratched Quay Walker off my list because I thought there was better depth at linebacker throughout the rest of the draft. And he didn't have, supposedly, when you talk to people who really follow him throughout the year, good instincts. And that's the big thing for the Patriots, where historically Belichick will take guys who are a little bit slower on the stopwatch, but their instincts are better than most. So they get a step ahead that way, and it kind of makes that 4.6 to a 4.8 guy a little bit of a wash. But again, they were exposed by Buffalo. People I talked to, and you don't even have to talk to anyone inside the league to know Buffalo didn't punt those last 2 games, right? So it's certainly a question mark. I think Mac Wilson and McGrone are definitely would be their fastest inside linebackers in recent years if they both start. But I don't think Juwan Bentley's going anywhere, and they made him a priority, as like I said, bringing him back on a 2-year, $9 million deal.
No, for sure. No, that's definitely good points, right there, and definitely hear what you're saying. Wanted to also ask you about this coaching staff and all the changes that have been, made in the Patriots front office, because there's been, quite a bit that has changed, from last year to this year, from a coaching standpoint with this team. So, and a lot of, guys are in new roles due to those changes. So how do you feel about, this coaching staff coming in, to this, upcoming season? And do you feel like they have the, the right guys and the right, spots, to, be able to, get the best out of, the players and the talent that they have on the roster?
Yeah, it's a boring answer, but it's a lot of we'll just have to hurry up and wait, right? Because that offensive staff you mentioned looks totally different. We talk about Josh McDaniels, but he took Mick Lombardi, the receivers coach, offensive line coach Carmen Brasillo, and their quarterbacks coach Paul Hardigree. So you have new coaches at these positions and coaches like Joe Judge, Matt Patricia, who good for them, got to be head coaches in the league, but don't come from offensive backgrounds. And Belichick's stance on this is, look, they're good coaches. Good coaches means you can coach anywhere. I'm not particularly of that belief, and I think you need guys in there, particularly at quarterback, who are seasoned and experienced and are not learning on the job with, the kid they're coaching, obviously in Mac Jones. But from people that I've heard from, they have more faith in Joe Judge, even though he got some pushback as a receivers coach in 2019, because people are just universally low on Matt Patricia, man. Like, it's just they see him as arrogant, and I think it's difficult to go to the offensive line where you're coaching up guards and centers, on the interior very differently than you might be at tackle. And when you have guys like Dante Scarnecchia or, other offensive line coaches who just, that's what they've done for 20 years. They know how to handle that difference. But there was a reason when Scarnecchia left that Patriots divided those 2 jobs between Cole Popovich and Carmen Brasillo, because again, it's just different in that nature. Just have one guy step in, and he might even have help from Billy Yates, who was an assistant last year and shipped in with Brasillo. But it's just really tough to see because you've got the biggest group on the roster with the offensive line and then the most important position with the quarterback. And the players might be okay, but the coaching is both, in those spots, a real question mark.
No, for sure. I was just going to say, I want to specifically talk about Joe Judge, because this is a guy that, I'm really concerned about, particularly since they're saying he's going to be one of the main guys working with Mac Jones and trying to, develop Mac Jones. And this is a big year for, Mac Jones being his second year in the league. He has a year under his belt. And, and definitely want to see some improvement and, and some progress, being made in this, in this upcoming season with them. So, and there's been, I heard a lot of backlash, regarding, Joe Judge. So I don't know, how do you feel about him, working with Mac Jones? I also heard the tight end coach from last year is going to be, working with him too. And then who's going to be calling the plays on offense since Josh McDaniels is gone?
Yeah, so Joe Judge will have to wait and see. It's been reported he'll coach the quarterbacks, and that would be my expectation so far. I think, again, it's a position he hasn't coached before, and his hiring choices in New York when he was the Giants head coach are really questionable. And part of that is because Jason Garrett, who was his offensive coordinator for the first season and a half he was there, was really tight with the Mara family. So look, like your boss, my boss, whatever the owners say in New York, that's what goes. But, his other coaches that he selected on staff, Freddie Kitchens, we know how that flamed out in Cleveland and New York. So it's just difficult to say until he gets in the room. I think the good part is if you're looking for signs of optimism or a silver lining, Mac Jones is a self-starter. This is a smart kid. That's probably why they drafted him. Of course, he's going to need coaching every single day, but by now he's got the system down. So it'll really be a matter of, I think, the play caller, which is a question mark, but I think Nick Caley, the tight ends coach, who's now the most tenured assistant on that offensive staff, would be as good a candidate to call plays as anybody. Now, just because I think that doesn't mean Bill Belichick does, but that would be my chief concern is who's calling those plays because, that's really, it's going to set up Mac, who's a guy was brought in here to bring the system to life, right? He plays and looks like Brady. He's not Tom Brady by any means, but stylistically they're very similar, and they use those strengths, accuracy, processing, decision-making, to move the ball on offense. And I think whoever sets him up in the best position to use those strengths, namely the play caller, is going to have a big say over this offense as much as anyone. But Belichick will be hands-on offensively, I can tell you that too.
And I did hear that as well, that he'll have quite a bit of input on the offensive play calling this year. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes.
Yeah, I don't know if it'll be play calling. That's still to be determined. It was something that was floated at the Combine when I was there a couple months ago. But he meets, just as he did with Brady, every Tuesday with Mac Jones. They go over the game plan, how they want to attack particular defense. And look, no one sees defense better than Belichick, right? So that coaching, I think, will be just as important almost as important as what he gets Wednesday through Friday when they're going through practice from Joe Judge.
Absolutely.
Andrew, thank you for answering these questions. I think the things you got to say about these is really interesting, and you make some really great points. But I wanted to get your thoughts on another team that's currently in the playoffs right now. I'm talking about the Celtics, who lost their first game in the second round against Milwaukee Bucks, 101-89. Team looked pretty stagnant and not themselves, and they looked like they were getting bullied around a little bit. What was your thoughts on the first game here against the Bucks, and what kind of adjustments do you think we need to make to have better success against that team?
Yeah, it's a simple, boring answer, but I think you got to get your second best player in Jaylen Brown playing a lot better, right? I mean, between his turnovers, the lack of playmaking, I think the team that we talked about and saw be the best team in the NBA, the last 40, 50 games, it started with that defense that became elite when they moved Robert Williams off the ball, and he's more of a help defender than the guy in the middle of the paint. But it's also Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown doing a lot better job passing, right? That playmaking elevated them in the half court where before you're kind of playing your turn, my turn, and then you see what you can do in isolation. They started to move the ball really well, and that just didn't happen as much against Milwaukee. So I think as much as that game looked really bad, right? Like Giannis was Giannis, and that dude only had 24, but he was the one making the right passes. He was getting the rebounds. I think you just go, hey, we swept the Nets, but it was really the closest sweep ever in the first round of NBA playoff history. So it wasn't really a sweep. You get your nose bloodied a little bit. You kind of get shocked back into, okay, this isn't going to be a cakewalk. And you come back, hopefully, if you're the Celtics in game 2 and use that energy and urgency to tie it up. Because most people thought this would go 6 or 7 games, right? So even though they didn't get started on the right foot, I don't think they're in serious trouble. But it's close to a must-win for game 2. You never want to be in that situation. I think if they're going to fix it, it'll be Jaylen Brown taking some of the pressure off of Tatum late clock, taking care of the ball a little bit better, and both of them doing a better job kind of sharing the ball.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. They definitely have to score a little more. But one thing I did see a lot, like these guys were turning the ball over a lot. It seemed like they were under a lot of pressure, making really bad decisions. I mean, it seemed like they were throwing the ball away at times. What do you think is going to help them, to not do that for game number 2 on Tuesday?
Yeah, I think you just got to be a little bit more purposeful with the ball. Part of it, I think, is just going from the Nets defense to the Bucks defense, right? Like that's a huge shock to the system. You got a team who's committed at that end. Yeah, who's talented. They play together. They're the reigning champs. Like they've got that confidence about them, and they've got that experience where, Kyrie's talking about, oh, we didn't have time to gel. Well, first of all, that's his fault, right? Like he just wasn't available, wasn't on the floor. The Bucks gelled last year. They got that championship swagger, which you only gain by winning a title. And I think defensively, the Celtics just have to get adjusted to that. And I think they can, because we forget they went into that game as 4.5-point favorites. So this is not a team, especially without Chris Middleton, that's invincible. But you've got to be just as together as they are and find a way to get easier buckets, which, of course, like I mentioned, you're sharing the ball a little bit better and get better at play at a Jaylen Brown. I think your overall talent win, edge should win over, provided Giannis, best player in the world, doesn't go kind of supernova on you.
And what's their adjustment defensively to address both Giannis and Drew Holiday?
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because Giannis is going to get his to a degree, but I think the best you can do is keep them out of transition, because you don't want to give a good team like that easy buckets and just, life when you might have them dead in the water and you're running up and doing well in the half court against their defense, which of course is very good, or, wasn't at the All-Star break, but you get in the playoffs, everyone's energy gets up a little bit. So I think you just got to deny those easy buckets, and any free throws, and just make them work. So that means in the mid-range, Giannis, you want to take any three-pointers, that's great. And it's a lot easier said than done, of course. But, if you deny a couple transition buckets, that's 4 to 6 points. And that's big in the playoffs, especially when you get in the second half and games are decided possession by possession.
I think we're just about time here. So I think we have time for one last question, Barry, if you want to ask one last question.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Just wanted to ask you real quick, Andrew, what's your favorite moment that you've had covering the Patriots since you started covering the team?
Oh, man. A lot of good ones. But I would say the AFC Championship game in Kansas City from 2018 season. That was one of the best games I've seen, period, on TV, in person. It was a wild atmosphere just to see them go down twice in the fourth quarter and then overtime. Like, it's just one of those that had everything. And you to be there for that and right throughout the night, just relive it. Like, the Super Bowl is great. You're never going to forget a Super Bowl. I think we all agree 13-3 wasn't the most exciting game, but, it felt like you had the Super Bowl, and they go on the road and beat Kansas City and kind of say, we're still here one more time for that title with that AFC Championship game. It was a day and night I'll never forget.
And real quick, how was the atmosphere that night? Were you there covering the game in Kansas City?
Yeah, that was my first year in the beat. So I was at Mass Live for the 2018 season, and the press box is way high up, so you kind of have this distance that, like, if you're watching on TV, it honestly makes you feel closer, right? Because they got the center mic'd up, you got the coaches mic'd up on the sideline. But even with that distance of being so high up, just the energy that emanated from the crowd below you, it's literally a sea of red. You look on the parking lot, it's red as far as you can see with all these Chiefs fans. And just the stakes and how well that game was played, a great defensive gameplay. And then Patrick Mahomes is doing all the things we know he can do now. Brady, of course, Gronk, and Edelman. Like when I say it had literally everything, it really did. And it was my first season. I couldn't have asked for a better ending.
Awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. That was awesome for sure. And my favorite memory too of of the Patriots, dynasty era for sure. So no, it's definitely a classic. So thank you for sharing that, Andrew. Appreciate it.
Definitely. Thanks for having me, guys. It's been good talking to you.
Thank you. Really appreciate it, man. For people watching, make sure y'all watching Andrew. I mean, y'all following at _Andrew Callahan, man. You got some great content out on Twitter. So hopefully we'll get to talk to you soon, Andrew. Have a good night, man.
Sounds good. Be well, guys.
All right, y'all.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. Nice meeting you, Andrew. Take care.
Yeah,
have a good night.
See you, Vlad. See you, John.
All right, see you.
Yes, sir. That was at Andrew Callahan again. The Twitter handle is it's at _Andrew Callahan. Make sure you guys are following him. Make sure you guys are following us, because obviously we're keeping up with the game, bringing you guys some of the dope, content creators in the industry right now. Working for the Boston Herald, and it's pretty great to hear his thoughts. So make sure you're following us. It's everything. We're on everything at ProFan Sports, on everything except for Instagram, and that's at ProFans_sports. We drop every week. We're on YouTube. Make sure you're subscribing, liking, sharing, commenting. That's the best way you support the channel. Send this out to your friends, man. We really appreciate your support. Until the next episode, man, we out of here.
So everyone, have a good week. Take care, and happy Mother's Day.